Look at Hillary Clinton.
This is a man who has called women pigs, slobs, and dogs.
She's the devil.
Every time I think about Trump, I get allergic.
I think she's a very unstable person.
Who acts like this? I'll tell you who, a bully.
This US presidential election campaign has been like no other, and Sky News has followed every twist and turn and jaw-dropping moment.
You could put half of Trump supporters into what I call the basket of deplorables.
I'd like to punch him in the face.
But what happens after the battle is over and the White House is won? What next for America?
We have some bad hombres here, and we're going to get them out.
We are not afraid.
Our specialist correspondents are going to take a look at what the future might hold. Will the United States continue to be the world's policeman? Will it maintain its dominance in the global economy? And can its Conservative Party heal the deep schism its candidate has created? First, we take a look at the long-term effect this bitter campaign might have had on the American psyche.
Donald Trump is changing the America people thought they knew.
They're bringing drugs. They're bringing crime. They're rapists.
Family values, decency, decorum, all challenged, even threatened by his insurgent campaign.
Don't worry, we'll take our country back very soon.
Anger and contempt, fixtures in public life. This country somehow losing its innocence.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States.
I don't know what I said. I don't remember.
And the fallout is being felt well beyond politics. On the streets, in the playgrounds, in the churches.
Every time I mention her, everyone screams, lock her up, lock her up, lock her up.
This is the story of the Trump effect.
USA! 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 Wow.
Little League Baseball in Tampa, Florida, where the toxic language of the campaign is being absorbed by the children.
What do you think about Donald Trump?
That he's a liar and he doesn't care about our country.
I think Hillary's a liar.
If Hillary gets in, she's going to bring a lot of illegal immigrants and, like, Syrians.
Do you hear people talk about him at school?
Yes.
What do they say?
That he's a liar, racist, and that's it.
For some in this Hispanic neighborhood, Donald Trump's anti-immigrant stance is having a profound effect. Stephen Cruz is 8. His family is Dominican, but in the US legally. He's become convinced something awful is going to happen.
I don't want to be away from my parents.
You think you're going to be split up from your parents?
Yeah.
Does that worry you?
Yeah.
If you could talk to him, what would you say?
I'll say calm down. And take it easy on the kids and stop yelling that much.
There seems to be some anxiety and less tolerance than I've seen in the past.
Val and Laura Jane teach at a school nearby. They believe Trump has transformed their classrooms.
I've heard recently things like, well, I'm going to sit over here with the white kids. And that really shocked me. That was a few weeks ago.
A kid had a red hat. It said, Make America Great Again. And then I saw him turn to his classmate and show the hat, who was a Hispanic girl, and showed her the hat, and just her face. She was obviously upset by it. And she just turned around and walked back into the classroom, and he high-fived with his butt and thought it was nice.
So people are using Trump's campaign slogan to bully in your school?
Oh, yeah, they're threatening or insulting, bullying other kids.
The Republican base decided to send a brawler a knockdown, drag-out street fighter. Something unseen in the modern era of politics.
Montgomery, Alabama. This city, central to the civil rights movement, understands division and fear more than most. We're here to visit the Southern Poverty Law Center, which tracks social justice issues. Maureen Costello has gathered thousands of stories from schools across the country, naming this new dynamic the Trump effect.
For many children, it's essentially been a traumatic experience. We have children now who have been coming to school every day and living their lives every day for the last 6 months or so, who are worried about deportation, worried about being called ISIS, worried about being called a terrorist, worried about just being told that they don't belong here and that they are not loved and welcomed and that they're hated. And those children are wounded by this, and they are not going to be healed just because one night a vote happens.
How do you feel when you listen to Donald Trump speak?
I feel nervous and frightened. I feel threatened. I feel, I have spent over 40 years teaching about American democracy. I love this country and I love the kind of government we've built. And I feel like that is all under attack. And it hurts.
But some are encouraged by Trump. And deep in America's heartland, powerful forces are emerging.
How are you doing?
Good.
I'm Hannah.
Matthew Heimbach is a white nationalist. We meet in a car park first. He's paranoid about people discovering where he lives. We're allowed to film him packing leaflets to send to supporters before heading out to meet his target audience.
We're in Beattyville, Kentucky. Beattyville is an impoverished community. It's the 5th poorest town in America, and it's overwhelmingly white working class.
Some people might look at Donald Trump and think what he's done is embolden people with racist ideas.
Well, what he's done is he has shown that these ideas of nationalism, not globalism, are something that's popular with everyday white Americans. This is what normal white Americans think, and this is what they've been waiting for.
But at the very heart of this is fear. Fear of a changing, increasingly diverse America.
How can you blame America's problems on multiculturalism? Isn't that terribly simplistic?
The history of humankind is tribal conflict, one group against another. So we as white nationalists are advocates for our tribe, for our people, and we're not content to see ourselves become a minority in our own countries, be demographically, culturally, and economically displaced. We are here to fight for our communities, and we're not going to be pushed aside.
There is interest in his ideas here, driven by isolation and hardship.
We're over here, working our jobs, you know what I mean? And you got people like me collecting unemployment, you know what I'm saying?
And you think that immigration is responsible in part for taking your work?
I do. I mean, you see it every day, I worked with a million of them.
Donald Trump has brought more energy and life to the hate movement in the United States than any politician in modern memory. He's extremely dangerous. This country has spent the better part of its existence trying to end racism, right? The original sin of this country is white supremacy. That idea is what allowed slavery, allowed segregation, allowed Jim Crow, all these terrible things to happen. And it took from the founding of the country until the mid-60s to just change that in the law, not in the hearts and minds of people necessarily, but in the law. And since Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Act and so on, we've spent a lot of time trying to move away from racism in society. And Donald Trump has reversed those efforts in basically a heartbeat. It's tragic.
Few places have felt the Trump effect more keenly than in Michigan, home to America's largest Muslim community. They say the last time they felt this marginalized was after 9/11.
Almost every single one of my friends has had an incident where someone was either trying to run them off the road or verbally threaten them or physically threaten them. Now it's become so common that it's unusual when you meet someone who hasn't had something happen to them if they are visibly Muslim.
How do you feel? Do you feel less safe in Trump's America?
I do. I do. Being someone that's visibly Muslim, someone that does wear the headscarf, I do feel less safe. I feel almost as if there's a bullseye or a target on my head.
If you could speak directly to Donald Trump, what would you say to him?
I would tell him to soften up. Stop it. Represent all of the people. Be nice.
How we repair the torn fabric of our civic lives. We are in the middle of an emotional civil war in this country. And just like the 19th century Civil War, we'll be dealing with the fallout for years.
Trump is testing faith in communities everywhere. Bill Doherty is a psychologist. He's been invited to speak at his church, and he believes Trump threatens America's mental health.
This is a man that a lot of women feel like they have known in some way. This is a man that many men have experienced as a bully in their lives. So there's this psychological, personal level. And then there's this sort of larger societal level that he represents a threat to our institutions and our democracy. So it's a double whammy. Trump represents a kind of human Molotov cocktail that is being hurled at the establishment in the United States.
In Trump, millions of Americans have found a voice. He's torn apart the old order of things, exposing deep fault lines, creating new ones, shaking and shaping what this country believes about itself. America's next president will serve for 4 years. The Trump effect will last for much longer.
January 2017. Reports that Russian forces have entered the Baltics. Vladimir Putin is using military muscle to test America's new president. US Marines are sent to counter the threat on behalf of NATO and are drawn into heavy skirmishing. Yeah, hit. This is an exercise. But with relations between Russia and the West going from bad to worse, there's a new sense of urgency and a fear of this happening for real.
This year we more openly speak about who is the threat and how we have to react on this threat.
And what specifically is the threat, do you think?
The threat is so much this military forces near the eastern border from Russian side. These activities and escalation, this this location of a huge number of soldiers near this east borders.
US paratroopers prepare to drop 150 miles from the Russian border in the skies over Latvia. While they drill with allies, rhetoric in their presidential election back home raises doubts about NATO that hang over its more vulnerable members, as tensions with Russia continue to build.
We always train with a sense of urgency.
So we always look to the future, and the future's unknown, right? The future's unwritten. And so when we train, we make it as tough and as realistic as we can every time.
Russia and its leader haunt the Baltics. Countries like Latvia still trying to emerge from decades of Soviet domination. The last Cold War cast long shadows here still, and now a second one looms large. Former Foreign Minister Sandra Kalniete signed Latvia up to both NATO and EU membership. She says the world needs to wake up to the threat posed by Russia.
I think it is very dangerous because it is unpredictable. As a president, Putin is unpredictable. He is not guided by pragmatic political analysis.
How worried should we be by Russia, do you think?
I would say that we have to be very alerted, that we have to be vigilant and we have to be smart and resilient.
And if we're not, what happens then?
God knows what happens then.
Russia's new posturing beyond its borders and fears of a second Cold War aren't the only challenges for America's new president. China's expanding its military and territory. North Korea aggressively pursuing nuclear weapons. From Libya to Yemen, the Middle East is in flames. Revolutions descending into savage civil wars. Huge numbers are on the move, desperate to escape chaos and violence at home. If Hillary Clinton wins the presidency, that's the world she inherits from Barack Obama. But from what she's saying on the campaign trail, she's not planning any major shifts in foreign policy.
People around the world follow our presidential campaigns so closely, trying to get hints about what we will do. Can they rely on us?
Will the Americans again lead the world? That's what is at stake.
The man who led the West's most powerful alliance through most of the Obama presidency says his successor will need to be different.
I think President Obama has been too reluctant to use military force or threaten to use military force to prevent conflicts in the world. So after this period of reluctance, we need more American interventionism. Actually, we need America as the world's policeman. We need determined American global leadership.
Is it not possible, though, for a superpower simply to retire and give up on being a superpower?
No, superpowers don't get to retire.
But in this election, millions of Americans have shown their support for a candidate who wants the US to withdraw more and intervene less, and who's questioned its ties with old allies. In a year of global turmoil, some of the architecture of our post-war world order has already begun to crumble. The rhetoric in America's election hasn't helped. This is the House of Commons library that provides MPs with independent research and where records of all the nation's treaties are kept. I've come to find Parliament's copy of the North Atlantic Treaty, signed in 1949. For almost 7 decades, the agreement recorded in these pages has helped guarantee our peace and security. The key part of the treaty is Article 5. The parties agree that an armed attack against one or more of them in Europe or North America shall be considered an attack against them all. It's a principle of all for one and one for all. Donald Trump threw that principle into doubt, threatening to withdraw America's automatic support for its allies.
We have spent trillions of dollars over time on planes, missiles, ships, equipment, building up our military to provide a strong defense for Europe and Asia. The countries we are defending must pay for the cost of this defense. And if not, the U.S. must be prepared to let these countries defend themselves.
It could be that he puts a nail into the coffin of the transatlantic alliance. That is possible.
Sir Christopher Mayor was the UK's man in Washington in the Bush years, at the height of the war on terror. The Republican nominee, he says, has undermined NATO.
He has already suggested that Article 5 of the NATO treaty, the one that says that if a member state is attacked, then all the other members of the alliance are duty-bound to come to the assistance of that state. He has already said if that state, in his view, is not paying its dues into the NATO budget, then Article 5 will be suspended. That is truly a nail in the coffin of the post-Second World War international order.
Whoever wins this election has lasting damage already been done by this campaign, to the way America is seen around the world, and to the way it projects its power. And has that already undermined global stability?
It says, to my mind, that America's politics has gone very, very wrong.
Veteran observers of American politics, looking on in horror, are in little doubt.
I don't think we've ever seen a candidate emerging of this kind in the United States, actually really ever, certainly since it's been a great power. And I think we are right to be worried about the potential implications of this transformation of the basis of American democracy.
In Washington, the ghosts of the country's great past are looking down on this election, while Americans wonder if they'll ever see their like again.
We appreciate greatness in many other aspects of the American enterprise. On the athletic field, in Hollywood, on Broadway, Pulitzer Prize winners, Nobel laureates, Bob Dylan. We have a hard time appreciating greatness in our political culture. The reason is simple. We don't see it anymore.
Americans have always believed that their form of government is exceptional. Abraham Lincoln thought it was worth fighting a civil war for. They believe that their kind of democracy isn't just the best way of running their own country, but should be an example for others to follow, an inspiration to the world. This election has been anything but. And ultimately, that may be the biggest challenge for whoever is sworn in here on Capitol Hill as the 45th president. Can they restore America's belief in itself and the world's faith in America?
Somewhere, hundreds of miles from the nearest city, deep in the forests of New Hampshire, sits a grand old hotel. It was here 70 years ago that America was crowned the world's economic superpower. It was here, in these halls and corridors, that the world changed forever. Now, it is on the brink of changing again.
I think this is a decisive election for the United States, and it will matter importantly for the world economy and the global financial system.
China's taken us over. Nothing's American-made anymore.
Whatever we angst at in the United States about Brexit will be nothing compared to what you Brits will angst about if we elect Trump.
That's what all presidents say. They want to make America great. I'm 51, I still haven't seen it yet.
It's very clear that America's role as the dominant force in the global economy is coming to an end.
We're in the Great Hall of the Omni Mount Washington Resort in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. This was the last of the grand hotels to be built. Probably one of the more paramount times in our history was obviously the Monetary Conference of 1944.
To be discussed are plans for the stabilization of world currencies.
This is the place where those 44 nations came to kind of guide us out of World War II. You can literally say that, you know, establishing the price of gold at $35 an ounce and really making the dollar the dominant currency that would back that gold up happened right here at this location.
The United States, since World War II, has played the role of global architect of major institutions. I mean, all of the global organizations, the IMF, the World Bank, the United Nations, the World Trade Organization, the Bretton Woods Accord, those all sound very global. They are American institutions, American values, American allies, American standards, American capital, American priorities.
American industry to save production costs.
So what happened? What happened to the American dream, which brought decades of prosperity, growth, innovation, new products, new services, free trade, free flows of capital, not just for America, but for the entire world? When did all this turn into a nightmare? At least part of the answer is what happened to America's Rust Belt. While Wall Street boomed, the factories here are abandoned, empty, victims of cheap competition from Mexico and China.
Welcome to the city of Reading, Pennsylvania. Back in 2010, we were considered the poorest of the nation, of the city of its size. We've had people that have come through our system because the tannery, they worked in a tannery, the tannery left and went to Mexico. They're going overseas. So we see a lot of good, hardworking people frustrated coming into homeless services saying, I never thought this would be me. We thought we could retire here. We thought we could raise our family this way. And it just was pulled out from under them. One time we were known as the outlet capital of the country. I think back when this was booming and you couldn't find a parking space here. People came from all over the country. It was really vibrant, and now look at it. So there's a lot of hopelessness and desolation. I mean, imagine getting up in the morning and this is what you see. This doesn't give you hope. They're looking at this type of thing and sort of feel like, I've been kind of forgotten. We've been forgotten here.
Hello.
How you doing, sir?
Hope for Reading, the motto of this homeless shelter.
Without a job, you cannot get anywhere. And the way the economy is now, you see how the economy is. It's so many closed buildings here. A lot of abandoned houses, a lot of abandoned stores down on Penn Street. I mean, nobody's buying. That's what all presidents say. They want to make, America great. I'm 51, I still haven't seen it yet. There's always problems. I think when I was a kid, it was a prosperous place. And now that I'm growing up and I'm seeing what my dad went through, it's hard. It's not a prosperous place because they put you to struggle out there.
And I think the frustration is the mainstream. They've lost the confidence in Republican and Democrat. One of the largest rallies I've seen here in a while was the Bernie Sanders rally. They want something different. They're saying this isn't working.
Bernie Sanders particularly pulled Hillary Clinton very, very far towards a less trade-friendly policy. I think in the Republican Party, which is completely roiled and in chaos to some extent, I'm not sure Trump's position's representative. The fact that it's working, that he has so much of the vote, that he was able to win the Republican nomination, may influence other candidates running for the House of Representatives, for the Senate. I'm certainly very concerned about what this shows for the future in the United States, at least the next 5 years of a country retrenching, less confident about its role in the world, less confident about trade.
Safety beam guardrail is cold formed from strip steel.
But try to put yourself in the position of the people who live here in the Rust Belt, who worked for industrial giants like Bethlehem Steel, who helped build the skyscrapers and railroads. While the rest of America powered on, this place feels like it was left behind.
After 140 years of continuous hot metal production, the furnaces are cold and silent this Christmas. The passing of an era that has left Bethlehem with little to celebrate in this season of goodwill.
Given that many of the jobs here fell victim effectively to cheap imports from overseas, perhaps there's no surprise that both of the candidates have disavowed free trade, whether that's TPP, TTIP, even existing deals like NAFTA. Why stay open when effectively that means places like this get closed?
Well,
Bethlehem Steel was about employees. If you worked at the bottom at Bethlehem Steel and you stayed long enough, you worked your way up the ladder, you had wonderful benefits, you had perks, you had a lot of things that in today's world are not seen in corporate America.
The Free Trade Act was kind of like thrown at us, forced on us, and I don't know if it was the right thing to do.
If you're a blue-collar guy, you better be a serious worker here to survive.
To bring jobs back to our country, should be a priority. We have young children graduating college and having no job market.
China's taken us over, really. It's like nothing's American made anymore. If you look at the clothing, nothing's American made.
America needs to support America, and then it would maybe get somewhere. But America is supporting wherever they can get it cheaper.
There is another current, and there is a sentiment in the population, and it's not only in the US, it's in other countries as well, which try to reject the system that is not providing them the level of comfort and security that they would expect from that. That message is coming out quite loud and clear. Now, the response that has been found to those sentiments has been, we'll take care of that. Don't worry, vote for me, we'll take care of that because we will stop imports from country A, B, C, D, etc., etc. In terms of actual policies, that will be the wrong policy. It starts with the wrong diagnosis. If you diagnose the problem as a trade problem, you begin with the wrong diagnosis, and then you prescribe the wrong medicine.
The World Trade Organization, which sits here on the banks of Lake Geneva, is in many senses the home of globalization. These men and women spend their days discussing trade barriers, trying to cooperate. This is America's post-war legacy.
What's unique about this place is that every nation, from Afghanistan to Zimbabwe, gets a say. It's all done through consensus. And the question is, what kind of a world does the next US president want us to live in? Is it one where things are agreed this way, or is it going to be every country for itself?
If the country like the United States disconnects from the global economy, it's a disaster. It's a disaster. It's a catastrophe for the economy. So that is not going to happen. Any of those policies that are being proposed, if implemented, actually, you're out of power in 4 years.
As it happens, this very building was originally built as the headquarters of the League of Nations, the precursor to the UN. It fell apart because the US refused to become a member, an important lesson.
I went to dozens, if not hundreds, of international meetings, and the only ones that worked were the ones that followed US leadership. If the US does not give leadership, whether it's to the G7 or the G20, then very little happens. If Mr. Trump were to be elected, we really have no idea what he would do. But it clearly is unlikely to be a cooperative movement in the world economy. I think there's a lot of uncertainty as to what the US will do, and it matters at this juncture.
With Trump as president, I'm afraid that we will see a world that is not as open as it has been, and might change development in the world, and I think that would be to go in the wrong direction. But of course also Hillary Clinton has been skeptical to some of the trade agreements, so I hope that if she becomes president, we will still see a development towards a more open and globalized economy.
It is autumn in America. But what comes next? An economic freeze or the green shoots of recovery?
The reality is the US has always had a bit of an ambivalent attitude towards its role as leader of the free world. There have always been disillusions about the state of the economy and about the way that money is being shared between people. But throughout the years, this country's shown a remarkable attitude at reinventing itself, of boosting growth and coming back from the brink. As the great British economist John Maynard Keynes said at the conference here at Bretton Woods in 1944, how much better that our projects should begin in disillusion than that they should end in it.
Across America, Donald Trump has divided opinion and the party he represents.
We don't want to be too politically correct anymore, right, folks?
There are those that believe that he is the epitome of everything bad with Republican politics, and they hate him for it.
I have to tell you about the media. They are worse than Little Marco, and they're worse than Lion Ted Cruz.
I think the party is in a mess right now. It's very divided.
I'd like to punch him in the face.
If you want to find the Republican heart of America, come to Mesa in Arizona. Named the most conservative city in the country, they used to joke it was a place with wide streets and narrow minds. In 2016, this state might pick a Democrat for president for only the second time in 60 years.
The Republican Party, of course, is the conservative party in America, and I'm a lifelong Republican. This is a disturbing year for Republicans. A lot of us are in agony because of the man who hijacked the Republican Party, Donald Trump, and trying to figure out what is that going to mean for the future of the party.
He's the editorial director of the Arizona Republic. For the first time in 126 years, the newspaper's endorsed a Democrat.
Well, you have to work pretty hard as a Republican nominee to lose the state of Arizona or lose its newspaper. And so it was an extraordinary thing that happened. Had the Republicans nominated somebody like Marco Rubio or Jeb Bush, I don't think we'd be doing this interview right now.
The reaction from some readers was extreme.
We'll bomb your car, we know where you live, we will come for you, we hope you're hung like traitors. I haven't been involved in a presidential endorsement where there have been death threats until this one. We've had specific threats against our journalists, against our editorial page writers. Horrifying, absolutely horrifying.
In Arizona, as across America, the political debate is played out on talk radio.
He's been very clear about what his bias is. He is a Donald Trump supporter.
Republicans are caught in a quandary about what their candidate means for the party.
I think where the party missed the boat is Donald Trump had more votes in the primary than any Republican ever. And yet the party leadership didn't like Donald Trump. So where is the disconnect between party leadership and Republican voters? If voters love him, but leadership doesn't, there's some kind of a disconnect that they missed, and they didn't pay attention to it until it was way too late. Nobody thought he had a chance. And then all of a sudden he was the nominee.
Under the Friday night lights, you find another of those great American traditions.
The real story of America and the true story of America has always been the people who get up and go to work every day and work hard and do the right things and raise their kids the right way, and I think that's what makes America great.
But the Republicans in the crowd make no secret of their fears for the future.
There's fighting here and backbiting here, and there's not enough togetherness.
We're pretty supportive of Trump, but the last couple of weeks it's been pretty scary stuff that's coming out that I think it's just made a lot of people really nervous.
It's a game now, and that's unfortunate. I think it's just more reality TV, and I don't think any of it's good for America.
This has been a bruising election campaign, and many Republicans are in a daze. In many ways, Donald Trump is the very opposite of what Republicans traditionally want.
Build that wall, build that wall, build that wall.
Tear down this wall.
And the man they still idolize. The presidency of Ronald Reagan remains a dominant force in American politics. 36 years after his inauguration, they long for his conservative vision of America.
I've spoken of the shining city all my political life. In my mind, it was a tall, proud city built on rocks stronger than oceans, windswept, God-blessed, and teeming with people of all kinds living in harmony and peace.
I guess we can't all have charm and good looks too.
But apart from screen careers, the pair share little.
There was a tenderness, a decency to Reagan that you don't ever see in Trump. And if Reagan had looked at Trump, he would have been appalled by him. He would have understood in a second that this man represents nothing that the conservatives care about.
Ronald Reagan spoke about the greatness of America, and I think that's what Americans loved about him, is he didn't speak to Republicans, he spoke to Americans. We are the shining city on the hill. We're the world's last best hope. Americans felt like he stood up for them.
He was forceful and he held people accountable, but there was an element of humanity, you could see it in his eyes. I mean, he had a love for the country and such. And so when you see that, that's one of the things where people want to associate with that. And so now when you see this process and with the way social media is today with anonymous attacks and with just this blistering impact that comes at light speed now, and people just they want decorum, they want humanity back, they want to be nice.
Starting way back in 3rd grade, I used to sit beside Louise.
At the Saturday morning craft market in Mesa, they celebrate those staples of American life. Not everyone believes Trump is to blame for the state of the Republican Party.
It is actually, it's in chaos right now. And the Republican Party, I think, basically shot itself in the foot by not supporting better candidate, and then when they had a candidate, not supporting him. So I don't blame so much on Trump as on the party. They're going to have to get the trust of the base, people like me, to actually believe that they care about us anymore.
The Republicans were poised to take the White House. Had they put up a more responsible candidate, it might have been theirs. They might have had the House and the Senate. But this Trump phenomenon, this movement, has come along and laid waste to all that. It was so destructive to the Republican movement. We've seen a lot of racism and a lot of sexism, a lot of real nastiness that we're seeing among the Trump voters. Those aren't the values of the Republican Party. And so there needs to be a readjustment going on after this election.
Many Republicans, they've lost family members and friends over this election. There's been a lot of division, and I think that after this election is over, I'm hoping that Republicans can forgive one another and come back together and be unified and look for somebody that's going to be a great spokesman for those values and principles that we've held for so long.
But the warning signs were there for the Republican Party long before Donald Trump appeared on the landscape.
The failure is mine, not yours.
John McCain's loss to Barack Obama in 2008 led to the surge of the so-called Tea Party, low tax, small government, anti-Washington.
This is a time of great challenges for America, and I pray that the president will be successful in guiding our nation.
But then a candidate in 2012 who seemed to satisfy no one. After Mitt Romney's defeat, the Republican Party carried out a post-mortem. In essence, it said they needed to be more than just a party of rich, white, straight conservatives. To stand any chance of winning a presidential election ever again, it said, in a country with booming Latino and Asian population, they needed to reach out to minorities.
We should be reaching out to everyone and saying it isn't about a color of skin or a race or a gender or an age. It's about a set of principles that the government should be smaller and should spend less time in your life, and it should be as small as possible and do its job. And that's what we want as a party. And I think you will attract, not everyone, but you can attract young people, and I think we've missed the boat.
I think within Hispanic population, like here we have 31% of our population is Hispanic, and 50% of that 31% are under the age 18. And you know what we know they're being taught in their homes? We know they're being taught hard work. We know they're being taught that religion is important to their family. These are all things that align with the conservative movement, but people don't know unless we invite and invest in their communities.
Open the eyes of my heart, Lord. Open the eyes of my heart.
But where conservatives gather, this is a time of unease.
Holy, holy, holy.
Whether Donald Trump wins or loses, a day of reckoning is approaching.
Savior,
It's awful for the party. The party is in tatters at the moment. It will recover. We need a conservative party in America. We need the contest of ideas. I think decent people are going to step forward and say enough.
I think we're going to have a real sit-down, heart-to-heart conversation after this election and decide where we want to go.
If we lose the White House, there's going to be time for the apathy, and people are going to pull back because they feel like they lost, and they lost more than just an election. So it's somebody that, as a leader, has to come out and inspire them to re-engage.
The wheels fell off the party. The wheels will be put back on because a conservative party is essential to this nation.